Hello and welcome to UK Cinema History. I'm your host, Eric Trommater. This week we're going back to 1962, The Loneliness of a Long-Distance Runner, directed by Tony Richardson, with a screenplay by Alan Silitoe based on his short story, and starring Courtney. This is our third film directed by Tony Richardson, our fifth produced by him. This is, of course, our second Silitoe film. Because we, of course, also covered Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. And if you look at the Woodfall films, this is actually our fifth, because, of course, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning was Woodfall films. And we also covered Ken Loach's Kess, which was which were all produced by Tony Richardson. So maybe not a name as well known as some of the other ones that we talk about here, but Richardson, whether it's through his production through Woodfall Films or through his actual films that he directed himself, is probably the most important pivotal member of what we always talk about when we talk about the free cinema movement. But this was Yassi Soufi's choice. And now that I've kind of gotten that out of the way, I'm going to kind of turn the episode over to Yassi. But Yassi, before I'll turn over the hosting duties, I want to kind of ask you a real brief question. When I scheduled this based on your recommendation, it was my decision that we should do this back to back with A Hard Day's Night. Now, knowing me the way that you do, what do you think my motivation is between trying to compare this film to A Hard Day's Night?
Should I? Okay, first of all, hi. You just cornered me with the first question. Uh, wasn't that the question for you? Like why you put these two back to back? So I think based on the conversations that we had, one of the reasons is these movies are so. Everyone says like these movies are so similar to their French counterparts of French New Wave cinema. But we always argue that, first of all, they did a few, like the use of music, the use of visual techniques, the use of this avant garde of visual storytellings, of editing, of the use of camera, the cinematography, all of that. And beside all that, take using the real locations, the getting out of the studio, the sets, all that. They in British new wave of late 50s, early 60s, they did it first. They were more they kind of pioneered it before the French New Wave, and they did it in a most relatable, compelling way than the French New Wave. Like, to me, these characters are way more real than Godard characters. I'm not saying that like Truffaut characters, because his characters are so real, but to comparing them to Godard characters, and maybe that's why the characters of these movies, or uh, the Silita's characters of sort, were so were the stories, or were the inspiration for so many rock stars or rock musicians in 80s and 90s. Am I right? Like connecting back to the Beatles movie, to the Hard Day's Night.
Well, because I would say that they had their influences as well. For instance, Richard Lester had started out with the Goon Show, and you can see when you watch the so-called free cinema films by directors like Carl Rice, Tony Richardson, and our Lord and Savior Lindsay Anderson, a lot of influence of what they were doing on the radio with the Goon Show, and then with the television program that they had created for ITV in terms of jump cuts and these sort of things. Now, I'm not saying that the French New Wave didn't have any influence on them at all. Obviously, you can't watch this film and not see the influence of the 400 Blows, especially the scenes by the seaside and things like that. But what I am saying is that this was a Zeitgeist that had come. Part of it was technological. You had, the Bolex cameras that allowed you to be more free in terms of being able to handhold. Now that was for 16 millimeter, but then they invented the Aeroflex cameras, which they used to a great extent here, that allowed the ultimate freedom. The famous story from Breathless is Godard had a handheld camera with the cameraman sitting in a shopping cart and would push the shopping cart around for the ultimate freedom. Well, you get a shot like that here. And I don't know how they did it because, of course, Richardson never said. But also with sound recording, which the French would just post dub everything, whereas Richardson was taking advantage of the new Nagra 2 recorders that used a crystal instead of a cable to synchronize with the film, which, of course, in Britain was running at 25 frames a second, and America was 24 frames a second, which allowed you the ultimate freedom also to be able to actually record sound on location, which is a step the French actually had not really taken. What they would do instead is post dub virtually all of their dialogue, whereas the British New Wave almost instinctively, and then of course Richardson would later go on to abandon this with the films going after the loved one, and start using post dubbing. But it was almost a principle that as much of the natural sound and as much could be shot on location as possible. I also want to welcome our regular panelist, Sila Blume. It's very good to see you. But Yassi, this is your show, and take it away.
Sila, hi everyone. Hi Kathy. Hi Nishadali. Hi Mikey. Yeah. So you almost go like immediately to everything that matters. So what I really like to talk about uh in when we're talking about this film is, of course, uh it's almost in the title of the film, the loneliness of the long distance runner. So it it is of sort uh a coming of age story. It is a self discovery story. It's the way that you the they use this running, long distance running, as a framing device, the a transition point for the flashbacks, the way that they use jazz music during those running scenes, and the cinematography that I asked you, that I don't know, for a movie at this budget, how could they pull it off? Because strangely enough, they didn't use the handheld camera during the running scenes, but they use it where we like they're least expected, like that, the walking scenes on the beach. uh so there are a lot of contradictions that, like, avant-garde use of camera. The editing, I think, is so beautiful, so smooth at times, but also so the very classic use of editing device to to for the nonlinear storytelling, for so many things. Also, the theme of this, that I know that they didn't like it. I don't like it, but that's what they've been called to, the angry young man theme. That I rather say it's the angry young people. That's why I said I think it's a coming of age story. That self discovery through running, through long distance running, through being lonely, and using the running as this as a metaphor of the journey that the character is going through, especially on that age, uh, and how it matters historically, because in this movie in particular, we see actual kind of uh, historic events like the speech, a king's speech, and everything. The other thing that I found really fascinating in this film, that I think that's why maybe this movie is different from the other movies that we watched and talk about, and this one is more like it gets more recognition than other movies, because I always complain that why these uh British free cinema movement, that's like what it's called, and I love to call it free cinema movement. That the realism, British new realism, why they're so underrated, why we don't hear a lot about them. Again, comparing to their French counterparts, because I think this movie has uh, something. It's hope in this one. Our angry young man in this movie is not as sad and as disappointed as the others. He has autonomy. He finds his voice through this running. And it is in the title that I really like. The poster is so colorful when we compare it to other movies of the same genre, of the same movement. And it still has everything that the other movies did. Like, it has that commentary on social class, on consumerism, and but this one has it more directly. Like, the we see how it says during that King's speech. So I just want to point out that everything that I'm talking about right now, I think we're going to elaborate on them. We're going to talk about. I'm just going through the things that I found really interesting in this film. The first time, especially the first time that I watched it, it was like, we hear in the King's speech that we are not like Americans, but in a few scenes, like in like 20 minutes before, not in a few scenes, we see how they buy this television, and then the television comes in their house, and the use of television and the way that it influences everybody, the way that it kind of hypnotizes everyone on that household. That was the first time that we see something like that. And also, it was also on Saturday night, Sunday morning, but it wasn't like the whole family. It was just the father. But in this one, we see it happens to every member of the family. But the way that our kind of protagonist faces television, with the voice and all the things that happens there. Again, it all happens in his loneliness, in his running, in his journey. This commentary on money. We see money, we physically see money in this film. We see, from the insurance to the coins that they steal, and uh, the money that they steal, that money that they steal from bakery, when money runs down from the drain, what like gets him caught. And the script, the way that it's used in the script is so beautiful. That running theme. It says at the beginning of the film, it was the psychiatrist asked him that, why you get caught? He says, because I wasn't fast enough. the use of overvoice. We hear it goes through his head over and over again. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't fast enough. But then when he gets to his realization, self realization, that he needs to be fast, he needs to be faster than life. He needs to be like the faster than the speed of light. But then when he reaches that point of being fast, just because he reaches what he needed, then he stops. He kind of stops and looks back, and we see everything that goes through his head. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna pass to Sila, but it's a very beautiful movie. It's poetic from its title to the poetic use of black and white cinema, the cinematography, the editing, and the, as you said, the sound, the music, the jazz music, everything is so poetic in a movie that is not supposed to be this poetic. It's supposed to be this rough commentary of like rough story of working class. It's kind of it has to work as a voyeurism and through the working class life. The movies that, but this one, it has this optimism to it. It has this poetry to it. And maybe that's why this one got the recognition more than others in the same genre.
It really didn't, though. Yeah, see, this was not only a box office bomb, but pretty much a critical disaster. It really wasn't rediscovered until actors who had seen it began to appreciate Tom Courtney's, because Courtney didn't do a lot. I mean, we discussed him in Dr. Zhivago, and he would later be nominated for an Oscar for The Dresser. But mostly what he did was on stage, and he was kind of rediscovered by a group of actors, and it only really came to prominence again in the 1980s. But there was an era between 1962 and, say, when did Dustin Hoffman do his thing about it? Like 86, where this was considered a failure. Even Richardson kind of considered it a failure. And
No, but
this is,
today,
yes, it's grown because, and I think it's because of what you said, which is that this is the only one of the so-called kitchen sink dramas that directly criticizes capitalism, and I think that's why it's still relevant today. But let's go to Sila. I did want to ask Sila also a question about this is our third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh film that John Addison did the music for, and Sila is going to be a little bit more familiar with than Yazzie and I, the use of Jerusalem throughout this and the various going from a straight up choral version to kind of a light and jazzy version, and uh, I think this is something that we all need to discuss. But what do you think Addison and Richardson were trying to say with this use of that particular kind of English hymn? And did those feet in ancient times walk upon England's mountain green? The idea that Jesus at one time had walked in England during that time in the Bible, that's not covered, and that explains why the English Empire worked so well. Is it as simple as a runner's feet hitting the ground, or did it mean something different to you? And then your opening reflections on loneliness, Sila.
Hello, everyone. I want to make a comment first because that was not part of my notes, but in reference to what you said a few minutes ago, Yassi, in terms of the, basically the comparison in the 60s of French, new, experimental, and this film, British. To me, the drastic difference is that, for example, with Breathless and several others that we have seen, there's a lot of artsy on your face. Breathless is is very, very artsy. I wouldn't say every minute, but a lot. And I find that this film does not use that at all. I think the only moment where I see this interest in something outside of the ordinary, experimental, artsy, is when the fight develops in the eating hall, and the camera movement creates this artsy atmosphere by going very quickly through all the tables as they're fighting or getting rowdy. And that's probably the only moment where I see a very direct, intentional, artsy spirit to the film. Other than that, a lot of angles that are interesting, a lot of cinema, I'm sorry about the background sounds. I hope that's not too much. But the very few films I have seen, I found in comparison to this film I find to be very gentle to the artsy mind. It's not really overdoing it with being different and new wave. In terms of the music, that is the first thing that really got to me from the beginning. And for context, I want to mention a couple of things. I got this from the so-called poem analysis. First, the last verse. I have quite a few thoughts about this because I find the film. Anyway, I'll just go ahead. So the last verse says, "I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, until we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land." So I'm not going to talk negative about what we call background music, because I think I've done plenty of that, and I also don't. I'll just praise it where I see it. But I thought there was one particular point in this situation which is quite unique. Some of you might know what is known as Nadia's theme. Nadia's theme is a piece of music, an instrumental, that was composed in the 70s by two individuals as Cotton Dream. And then somehow this piece was used as Nadia Comaneci won the perfect score in the Olympics, and she used this music, and it was titled Nadia's theme, but the original idea is Cotton's Dream. However, the piece has no lyrics, the piece has no history, and we connect this piece of music to a person, Nadia, but there is no content in the music. This is very different. In this movie, we might call it background music, but I don't think it is, because in this movie, from the beginning, they start by using different variations of this poem or song or hymn called or known as Jerusalem, which actually originally name was "And Did Those Feet in Ancient Time." It's a interesting title, but that's the original title of this Jerusalem by William Blake, and the music of Edward Grieg, I think. That's the music we know from that. Emerson, Lake and Palmer did a rendition of this song. So the song is being used, and we cannot detach the music and the tone, the sphere of the song. We cannot detach it from the lyrics, the meaning, the concept that was behind this poem, that was actually written in a compilation of different pieces and I have a couple of notes here about what Blake intended with this poem. My point is that there's a lot of content to this music. So when the director or the musician or the
I'm sorry to interrupt. It was Sir William Perry who did put the music to yours, not Regan. Just to correct that.
um, where I want to
Herbert Perry. My
read that.
apologies, Herbert Perry. So yeah, sorry about that. Just put that.
So I will have to look that because we are both correct. I must correct you and say that we are both correct. There are different versions. Let's not forget that the hymn is not a hymn; it's a poem, and different people put music to it. So Perry was one of them, and another one, the melody that we know as orchestration is not from Perry. But anyway, my point is that we're listening to music that is not background. We're listening to music that is supposed to add a very strong layer as to the philosophy, the psychology, the cultural implications of what the story is. The background in terms of this vision of England and godliness, and that's why I read the last verse. I will not cease from mental fight. This physicality that the governor is trying to impose in the whole idea. I don't think he's correct, but that's another topic. I need to drink something because. So, on a very personal note, my father used to say to me, if you keep thinking like that, if you keep going like that, you're going to lead a frustrated life. He used to say that to me when I was very young. I don't recall in which cases he said that to me. I don't remember what I did, what compelled him to say that. But I'm mentioning that because I love him above everything else, but there's a 50-50% chance that he was wrong when he said that I was going to have a difficult or frustrated life being the way I was or being the way I am. This story develops or starts developing actually backwards a little bit, but we see throughout the film that this young man is quite, I wouldn't say sentimental, but he's very touched. He's the only one that shows some connection, some spiritual connection to his father before he dies and after he dies. He's the only one. And so when we talk about the kitchen sink, as I think Yassi alluded to that before, I refuse to see this person as a young angry man. This society is bunkers, and he's the one who's in the middle trying to make sense of this bullshit. When he sees how his mother immediately starts buying things with that money and starts having this guy over, he's the one who is not angry, but he's not blind to the craziness that he sees developing around him. When he's with this woman, he does his best to be very sincere as to where his feelings are, where she stands, where he stands with her. I mean, this guy is not a rebel. And it is very clear at the end that when the governor had promised certain things, and he decides at the end, I'm not going to finish the race, even though they see that I could do a couple of steps and I finish, then they take everything away from him. That makes no sense. What society has done around him and with him makes no sense. So I don't want to see this guy as a rebel. I think he's a normal person who is living with a level of conviction even though his surroundings might tell him that he's going to live a frustrated life.
I think Silitoe would definitely agree with you on that because he always rejected the angry young man label for his heroes. Saturday night and Sunday morning, he never considered himself part of the Osborne school. That all of that came from. His characters aren't sexist. They aren't racist. They aren't a reflection of his criticism of the working class. They are a reflection of his criticism of the upper class. So I think you definitely hewed into the sense that Silitoe wanted when he both wrote this short story and wrote the screenplay for this.
So let's welcome Nishad Ali. Hi. Uh, but before we go back to what Sila was saying about the rebellion theme, hi. What do you? Welcome. What do you have to say about the film or the book?
Yeah, thank you, Yassi. Hello, all. Great insight on the film.
I've been
Um,
pronouncing your name Nishadali. Have I been pronouncing it incorrectly all this time and you've just been too polite to correct me?
it's actually pronounced Nishad Ali, but folks call me Nishad Ali, so it's all good, Eric.
Well, I believe in calling people what they want to be called, so I will from now on call you Nishaladi.
I appreciate that. Cheers. Um, yeah, I actually saw the film yesterday. Unfortunately, because of the hurricane that we had here in Houston, we're still going through some intermittent power outages, so wasn't really able to finish the film all the way, but I was able to catch most of it. It's funny, I kind of looked at it as a sports film, looking at the sports as a at the forefront as opposed to just the backdrop to everything that was going on in this young man's life. And the governor, as a former runner, I'm thinking the governor may have also had a troubled, you know, childhood, a troubled past, and he saw himself in the main character, trying to get him to go beyond, the impoverished neighborhood of Nottingham, and to get out of the rehab facility that he's in. And basically, his only escape was running. Um, it's like he ran to escape the anxiety, the depression, everything that happened with his dad. His mom basically using the insurance money for extravagant items. And so, when I looked at this, the main character, I kind of thought of another film. I think it was with Robbie Benson a long time ago, called Running Brave. And I was like, he can really make something out of himself just on his God given talent of running. He could be like, the next Carl Lewis or the next Ben Johnson, just in theory. But I think he also realizes that he's so surrounded by all this pessimism and negativity, and um, I think it's gotten to him, and he doesn't really have that faith in himself that the governor uh, has, even though it's kind of limited. So when he gets to that finish line and he doesn't finish the race, I think it speaks volumes that even if I do finish the race, I think I'm still going to be pretty much stuck where I am. I don't think I'm going to be able to excel, and I don't even think he really wanted to, But um, having that rebellious life, and kind of lashing out in his own way, and it just it was embedded in him. So a lot of times, folks will be like, "Well, here's your opportunity. Here's your chance to get out of this sort of conundrum that you're in. Why don't you want to do it?" Well, it's because pretty much used to this lifestyle, and I think he was pretty much used to what he was going through, and to kind of get out of that element, Maybe he was apprehensive. Maybe he didn't know what was around the corner or around the next lap. But all in
Can
all,
I follow up on that point and ask you a quick question relating
yeah,
to the
sure,
two points you just made?
sure.
Because you and I perceived the same thing.
Hmm.
I had seen that he thought of himself, and he saw himself in the governor if he were to decide to play the governor's game, and he did not want to become that man. He didn't want to become the man.
Hmm.
And so by rebelling against the governor, he is breaking that cycle, and he will do his 18 months dismantling gas masks rather than become that, because what next step does he have? They joke, they jokingly say things about you could run for the Olympics or what have you. He's not going to. He's going up against Edward frickin' Fox, who runs like a plotter. This is that's just the dream that the man sells you, so that they can find their replacement when they go to retire.
Well, he says that to his girlfriend at some point. I don't want to work as a slave for someone else. And he has clearly seen that what he's supposed to do by running this race and winning is to serve the governor. And he's not going to serve anyone.
I'm sorry. Continue with your point, Nishidali.
Yeah, no, I agree with uh, your point, Eric and Sila. That's exactly how I was, viewing what, or sort of imagining or thinking that this is what the main character was thinking, that he didn't want to serve, and that's why he didn't cross that finish line, end up like the governor. But yeah, I don't know. We see a lot of this, just not on the silver screen. It happens in everyday life. But I could relate to the character. I understand what he was trying to do, because I've been in that situation myself before. Not on the running pitch, but in the job market and in the job place. But all in all, I enjoyed the film very much. I think it was a great pick, Yassi, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for letting me speak, and
Oh,
yeah,
thank you for your contribution. It was quite valuable and illuminating.
thank
If
you.
I could, as
Mhm.
as owner of this room, even though Yazzie, you're the host, I kind of want to use a prerogative to tie what Silla and Nishidali have said into my own theme, and talk about what you spoke of, which is that this is really the first of these kitchen sink dramas to directly criticize consumerism and capitalism. And the line I think that attracted both Richardson and Addison to Jerusalem is the line, and did countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills, and was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? And to me, that I think was not only a part of that bit of capitalism, but it really dawned on me during the moments right before Smith is about to throw the race, when you hear the different voices in his head. The governor basically telling him, "Hey, if you sell out, the sky's the limit for you." You know, the voice of his mother, the voice of his brothers and sisters, the Rolls Royce television commercials. And to me, that was the dark satanic mills of Blake and in Jerusalem. And I really felt like, because right at that point, you get a different version of Jerusalem for the first time. He used more of a jazzy theme. He used more of a choral theme. You get a slow brass version of it, and it is that part of the refrain, and it stops where you would normally say dark satanic mills and doesn't finish that musical piece. And I really felt like that was a deliberate choice on Addison and Richardson's to draw attention to, hey, we are not just talking about class here. Because with the 11 plus tripartite education system, your working class guy is going to be lording it over quite a bunch of people who couldn't pass a test when they were 11 years old, and who's are either going to end up like Kess did in the movie Kess, back in the mine, that shoved down the mine, or like Arthur did in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, stuck at some factory. And that last shot really brought it home for me, about why Jerusalem and the dark satanic mills, because what are they using to teach these boys a skill but dismantling for scrap the masks, the gas masks from World War One, a number one worthless occupation. They're not actually serving any good. They're just scrapping out a bunch of stuff. And number two, what skill are they teaching them that they could use outside of that low-paid working class drudgery that we've seen all the way through these let's say kitchen sink drama, or free cinema films of the early 60s. So I'm sorry to take us off on a tangent, but I really felt like that each one of you had picked up points, and to me that each of those points really reinforced my idea that the choice of this particularly very familiar version of Blake's poem is part of that not only direct classism, but that anti-capitalist, anti-consumerism that this film is really years ahead of its time in exploiting. You saw it out of the communist countries during the 1950s and early 60s. You saw it a little bit in Italy, but it was normally of the kind of teasing Fellini sort, or of the, hey, aren't the idle classes rather boring Antonioni style. This is the first time we actually kind of see the working class directly saying, hey, this bootstrap mentality of what we now call neoliberalism is going to destroy our entire class and prop up not necessarily an aristocracy, but a group of people who were smart and lucky enough to pass a test when they were 11 years old as part of this 11 plus system and the tripart system. And that, quite honestly, and this is not something that is explicitly said in the film, but I am most likely reading this into it. But the fact is, your choice between the tripartite system, once you drop out when you're 15, which is what they want you to do, is to either imprison yourself into one of these jobs like Arthur has, throw yourself down the mine the way what's his name in The Sporting Life, Richard Harris's character in The Sporting Life does, or one of these Borstals. So the Borstal, to me, the juvenile detention center, is just a part of the tripart education system. And so, and I'm going to land my plane right there.
Then going back to the Blake's poem, and since Nishad Ali mentioned the running brave, I think it's worth saying that in the poem it speaks of the chariots of fire, and we should have like mentioned the 1981 chariots of fire. And I think it's a fair comparison between those two movies, and also the you know the the way that that movie used William Blake's poem and this movie used William Blake's poem. The way that this movie uh, kind of employed that struggle and aspiration. And I really want to talk about to you and Eric, to you and Sila, and also and Charlie, about the rebellion theme. Why do you think that the character is not rebellious, and he's not rebellious against authority? Like the whole move, like even in Tom Courtney's face, we see this rebellious spirit. How come you don't see that, that that change, that revolutionary change, and that rebellion against institution? Eric, you just mentioned that the, this the theme of the film, one of the main themes of the film is the commentary against uh the consumerism, the capitalism. So, and we see how he burns that, that the money, how he spend the money for his friends. And we just talked about, like, the way that he does not want to be like his father, just like in Cass. He's, even like that little kid, he sees that what's going to happen if he goes and work on that factory, on the mines. And here we see his resentment towards going back to his father's job. And in all these uh angry young men movies and books, we see this rebel against the previous generation. That's something that's so prevalent. How come you say that he's not a rebellious character?
Well,
The,
go ahead, Sila.
no, I just wanted to mention that I think the film, namely Richardson, or the screenplay writer, as
You're
well
you're
as
you're cutting
the
you're
government.
cutting in and out, Sila. If you could get a little bit better signal.
Um, is that better now?
Yes, perfect.
So, both the film as an entity, the governor, and Colin himself, all three are making me believe that this character is an intelligent one. Not angry, he's intelligent. He's observing a lot. And he even mentions in one position about the race. He's speaking with one or two friends, and he's saying, we we make them believe that we are doing what they want us to do. So he's very much in control of what's going on. He is, from the very beginning, on his facial expressions, we see he's observing everything, and he's swallowing and making believe that he's swallowing everything. He's very observant. I don't, and the reason I stay away from angry young man is because the anger in young man is focused on the person who is not obeying society. And I strongly disagree with that. The person in this case, Colin, he has very good internal reasons, and he has seen enough hypocrisy to not obey society. So I don't see him as an angry man.
Well, and I would turn the question back on you, Yassi. Who is he rebelling against? He's not rebelling against the factory. He's simply refusing to be a part of it, the one that his father worked for. He's not rebelling against the Borstal. He just serves his time out and wants to do it on his own terms honorably. He's rebelling against himself. He's rebelling against him making the same kind of deals he's rebelling, and I go back to the dark satanic mills that built the dark satanic mills, and he's building his Jerusalem based on his credo. That's not rebellion to me. He is refusing to opt into society. So, I think of Arthur in also based on a Silitoe book, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, and he is actually rebelling. He is Silitoe's rebel character. I really think Colin Smith is much more subtle because he is rebelling against himself. Because to Sila's point, he has something that Arthur didn't, which is self-reflection. And Sila used the word intelligence, and I don't really want to use the word intelligence, but some people know themselves and can spot flaws and can take criticism and can do self-criticism. And he is criticizing himself. The fact of the matter is, he's not there for an act of rebellion. He's there because he couldn't run fast enough away from the police. He didn't rob that bakery out of rebellion. He robbed that bakery because he got into a fight with his mother's new fancy man. They had spent through the insurance from his father's death, and his mother said, "Don't come back until you've got money." These aren't acts of rebellion. He's not doing things for he's not railing against the system. He simply says, that's not my bag, baby, and to use a 60s phrase, and refusing to be a part of it. And when he throws the race, I don't look at that as symbolically rebelling against the system. He is refusing to participate in it. He will not become the governor who, to Sila's point, maybe, or maybe it was, it was Nishidali's point, probably had a very similar background, and his way of coping with that is to try and save, in inverted commas, the next generation from what he went through. And Courtney says, I'm going to end that cycle. I'm going to live life on my terms. That's not rebellion.
It's the I just said, like at the beginning I said I think this movie were more like that, were more compelling than the other ones like The Sporting Life or other, because it was more uh like it wasn't as bitter and helpless and hopeless as the others, but the way that you guys are talking about it right now, it's just made it so like you're talking about Colin as this embodiment of like absurd hero, like an Albert Camus absurd hero, So that
We can
means,
use the E word here. He's an existentialist hero.
yeah, but of course, but that's what I want to get into. Like now the way that you see this movie is so interesting to me, because now I'm thinking like his runnings is not his journey through like rebellious or self-discovery. Now I see it as like a Sisyphus absurd kind of routine, a very Camus like character. The way that Collins finds a sense of liberation in his defiance is like, it's so Sisyphus. It's like he's going through this, absurd routine, this meaningless routine. And that's also very interesting, because there is personal freedom on that sort of absurdism. uh, it's not very nihilistic, but also we can look at it as a very like nihilistic existential despair. We can see all his,
Well,
recurring
can I
runnings.
follow my point up with a quote?
Of course.
So he says, the long distance run of an early morning makes me think that every run like this is a life, a little life, I know, but a life of full of misery and happiness and things happening as you can ever get yourself around. So he is not running for the governor, you see. And his narration tells us he is running for himself. He's running for the joy of running. I'm a human being, and I've got thoughts and secrets and bloody life inside of me that he doesn't know is there, and he'll never know what's there because he's stupid. I suppose you'll laugh at this, me saying the governor's a stupid bastard when I know hardly how to write and he can read and write and add up like a professor. But what I say is true, right enough? He's stupid and I'm not, because I can see further into the likes of him than he can see into the likes of me. So again, he's not rebelling. He just has absolutely no respect for these people.
Also, there's a combination of a clarity, which you just mentioned in this text, but it is combined with nothingness because he has no plans. He has no clue what he's going to do next. He has no education. He has rejected the job at the factory of his father, where his father worked. He has nothing. He has nothing to live for. So, in a way, he is thinking about these things, and he's portraying someone who's running with thoughts and memories and analysis, but at the same time, he has no plan. He's not a real thinker.
Oh no! So seriously, like you just turned this my very
Just kidding, just
motivated
kidding.
around.
Relax, relax.
Like I said, there is hope in this one. This is not that. And then you just said by the rejection of societal values and the existential despair, this is a very nihilistic movie.
Are
Am
you
I
gonna
like
pull
supposed to
a
say?
no, Yazzie? Are you gonna pull a high bender on me? Are you going to pull a high bender and say Kez had a happy ending because when the bird died, he made Kez tougher or whatever the fuck he said?
Never gonna do that. But something that Nishad Ali and Sila both mentioned, and I think that's so interesting, is that you said what you saw in the film was that the way, like, to see this position of the poor, their relationship with the crime, their reaction to crime, and and Eric, you also talked about it when you were talking about the capitalism and what money means to different money and power means to different classes. That I think that was something really interesting. I think we can also talk about it if anyone wants to
Well,
chat.
let's start with the symbolism of the fact that they take a first class train to the beach and have to take coach back because they run out of money. Let's talk about the fact that they get to 500 pounds, which is not a small amount back then, and her mother blows through it. The consumerism on the television that her fancy man who couldn't wait until her husband had been buried to basically move into the house, and it's implied, and I believe he says out loud for sure in the book. I can't remember if he does in the movie that that his mother had been fooling around with this guy long before his father even got ill. He's the one, the so-called fancy man, who brings the TV into their lives. And up until then, they seem like a pretty content family. And he's the one who brings the contention into his life. When Colin gets into the fight with his mother, it's over him and it's over what's on the television and it's over his kind of rejection of this of this consumerism that they as a family are going through, and yet he himself when he comes into to money because his mother gives it to him, he first says, no, no, no. And she says, no, you've been a big help. You should keep it. And he blows it over a weekend with his friend Dave. And where to and the two women, and and again, I think the symbolism that they go down first class and they come back barely scraping by in coach. Who hasn't, among us who has children, not had a vacation like that where you think you've got everything planned out to the letter, and somehow or another, no matter what, every dime you had somehow gets spent on that vacation. So you could have, $4,000 set aside, plan a $2,000 vacation. It's somehow always going to cost you all $4,000 because that's the way life is in a consumerist society. Others with kids, can you verify that this is a regular experience, or is it just me? And am I just bad with money? Sila, you raise children.
Yeah, I think that has mostly to do with the way the parents are. Some, if the father or the mother or both have the mindset, was kostet das Leben? Just enjoy life. They're going to spend more than what they should. But there are plenty of individuals that will just say, no, that's the budget, period. You don't have it, you don't have it. However, back to the topic, namely to William Blake, two things mainly are being addressed, as far as I understand, in this poem. One is the connection from godliness or Jesus Christ to England, and the physicality of the human being, when he says that at the end of the poem. So there's I'm losing my thread here. The poem is in part addressing the development of civilization into industrial age and capitalism, of course, later on in the film. So that is perfect in terms of spending too much money. We are now in a certain point, and suddenly we are given a different view into life. On one side with the money, on the other side with the TV, and we're going to use it. And in this case, it has nothing to do with the parents, but it has to do with this particular individuals, namely his mother and eventually his father. I don't know how he was when he was alive, but she has no sense of urgency. She has no sense of responsibility in any way. So that has to do with her, not with being a mother.
And to tie that back into Yassi's point and her initial question as to why we don't look at Colin Smith as a rebel, and I still stand by that, but definitely, while Colin Smith is not rebelling against this, I think Tony Richardson is rebelling against this, and I think Alan Silitoe is
Of course,
rebelling against
of
this.
course. That's the orchestration of the topic, yeah.
But not in the didactic Orwellian manner of having a mouthpiece sitting there saying, this is bad because, but by having somebody, or in the John Osborne manner of having a character literally screaming at the audience, how come you aren't mad about this? Which is, of course, the common criticism of the angry young men was that this was the educated middle class telling the working class what to be angry about and how to live their lives. Well, Silitoe doesn't do that, because Silitoe is giving us a non-aspirational figure, someone who is fine with being working class. And he is not rebelling against that system. And by doing so, it's a much more layered, much more complex film than, even though I think because Lindsay Anderson is a much better director and is much better in terms of staging scenes and in terms of the kind of editing that he uses than Tony Richardson. He is just a superior artist at that. I think This Sporting Life is a much better film overall. This is a much more layered and deeper film on a very similar issue, because to have This Sporting Life work, we have, and they're both about sports, in that case, what they call football, which is actually rugby there in the Midlands, in Yorkshire, versus the long distance runner, and this flashback stratagem that allows us to catch up with our hero to give us enough backstory that we can understand what his plight is. They share that in common, but beyond that, Frank in The Sporting Life is not a layered character the way Colin Smith is, and I take as an example the beach scene here versus the scene by the pond there in This Sporting Life. If you'll remember, Yassi and Sila, one of the things that we discussed was that scene felt very suspenseful. I was afraid like the little girl was going to drown. Whereas this and that's all because of Anderson's direction. Whereas here, and I think if I go back to the replay, I made this comparison between these two scenes back in The Sporting Life room. Whereas here, this is kind of shown as the highlight, the light moment that they have, that they're away. There's something very neo-realist about this idea that going to the beach purifies you. And I meant the Italian neo-realist movement that somehow or another this trek to the beach, but that's in a directorial choice. But if you look, there's a subtext in how each and every part of that scene is written, that you have no idea what these characters are up to. Why are they even with each other? Except on a lark, because again, we are not talking about characters who are motivated by the plot convenience and didacticism of their writer. He's providing a scene for its own sake. The way that The Sporting Life, every scene has a significance, and that makes it much, much, much less layered, because this means this. But these are not aspirational characters, and so you were seeing non-aspirational moments of their lives, so I think this is definitely the more complicated of the two films.
That's a very interesting point, because now I'm thinking that the argument that you just brought kind of gave the Sporting Life a very ambiguous, fatalistic, noirish quality. Like that made that movie also, that fatalist sense that is throughout that movie makes it so noirish. But also, I want to point out that this movie also has that ambiguity. First of all, the ending. We have that unresolved ending that we're uncertain of the of of future of Colin Smith's. We don't know the consequences of his act of defiance. But I totally understand right now what the point that you and Sila were making. Like, also, this ambiguity can question his act of defiance, you know, because we like this, it gives his defiance a nuance, makes it a nuanced gesture, so it kind of
Well, in a way,
limits his
isn't he
gameplay.
rebelling against? If he's rebelling against anything, he's rebelling against aspiration.
Or he's
And
or
and
maybe he's
it's in the dialogue, but it's much more subtle. But he basically says that that's how they get you.
or
They
his
trap
it's
you into
personal.
this aspiration, and then you are trapped. Oops, and you're now part of the system.
But I kind of like the when we have movies that our protagonist is not the hero, and that, I mean, the hero is doing this non-traditional heroic acts. He doesn't have that traditional heroic qualities. So that's why this act of rebellion is so ambiguous. And that's why this movie also has that ambiguity of of our Lord and Savior Lindsay Anderson's ambiguous quality that is in his movies. But I cannot argue with the point that you made that his act of rebellion, Colin Smith's act of rebellion, is based of personal pride and personal motivation and desire and autonomy rather than, broader political or social agenda. That I totally understand right now.
I don't see the film as being inconclusive. I think it's very clear what happens in the end. Namely, he does not kneel. That's simply the and to the point of how he rebels or not. They I lost my track of thoughts again. I'll come back.
Oh, you know why I said that's a bit ambiguous? Because the narrative structure of the film is kind of based on what happens and the consequences, especially like with the money and that visual sense of the money that drains out, that comes out from the drain at the end when it's raining, because it says, like, yeah, the inevitable consequence of your actions. And also this whole set of being in a delinquent, juvenile delinquents detention center. uh what was that, the British term for it? I'm sorry, that's slipped my
Bursta.
mind. Brussels, yeah, Brussels. So you did that crime, that petty crime. Now the consequence is being in the Brussels. So, and then you steal the money. The money will wash out the drain. You know that I think that's why but we don't see at the end the actual, like, what actually happens to him. We can, like, that depends on us. We can imagine that he has that ending, like like his body that gets punished. We see his punishment, we see things happening, we see the consequences in the film, but we don't see that. That's why I said the it's a sort of ambiguous, but you're absolutely right. We can imagine what happens, and I think we all have the same thoughts about what happens.
Well, I'm absolutely loving this discussion, but I do think we need to kind of move on to to some of the more technical aspects of this film. But before we do, Nishad Ali, you had been kind of quiet. Do you have anything to say about the film's themes before we move on to the next subject? Uh,
Yeah, he wrote in the
Yeah,
chat that he had to leave. So
yeah. Unfortunately,
I saw that. That's why.
one
That's
of our
why I wanted to
films.
turn to you and make sure
oh, I'm sorry.
you got your last word in before you left.
I I
That's
appreciate
all.
that. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're having another maintenance in the area, so the networks are going to be down for about another 2 hours. So uh, it's been ongoing here with Xfinity Comcast. So yeah, I just thank you for the insight. Great insight from all of you. Really appreciate it. I'm going to watch this film again, only because I couldn't see the middle parts and everything because of what was happening here technically. But yeah, great insight. Thanks for allowing me to express my views. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next movie and the next event. But Eric, Yassi, Sila, Kathy, Mikey, you guys all take care, huh? And I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you, and we do hope for the best. My daughter lives not too far from you, outside of Houston, so I've been really up to date on what's going on there. So
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
you guys have been hammered this summer.
We sure have. It's been a mess, Eric. That's it's just been an utter disaster. But we're hoping for the best, and let's see what happens. But yep, we'll see. Definitely, you guys.
In terms of technicalities, there's one thing that I would consider a technicality, and I'm wondering if that was just my copy. Well, it's not my copy, but the copy I saw. But when we see the young men towards the beginning of the film, they're basically, relaxing before going to bed. Everybody is in this room. Some of them are on their beds playing chess. Some of them are on the floor. And the camera goes through the room and we hear all these conversations. However, when it comes to the one man who's playing the guitar and singing, he's not audible. I found that very strange.
Well, that was your copy because I could hear it on the Criterion version,
Okay.
but it's overlapping dialogue, and he's meant to be somewhat drowned out because it's distracted, and the camera is distracted all the way through this. We do this all the time. We talk about their so-called manifesto of free cinema. No film can be too personal. So that's is the first image, part, and unlike Lindsay Anderson, who lives on objectivity, that the camera is always stationed very high, the setting is always very, the camera is ultimately the fourth wall of the film. Richardson in here and in The Entertainer, and especially A Taste of Honey, is very, very subjective with the camera. He is. There's a lot of stuff that's point of view, like that opening shot when they're coming up into the Borstal, and you see the gates from Smith's point of view. The shot that you spoke of, and that and the overlapping dialogue, which again the technology of the Nagra 2 recorder with the crystal syncing allowed him to do. But it does make so that if you've got a muddier copy, a bit like Robert Altman, sometimes some parts of the sound get drowned out. But you're not supposed to understand what he says. He's not completely muted. But when we go on with their manifesto, the image speaks and the sound amplifies and comments. Very important to this because the best of these films could be watched on mute and you could still follow them. This is one. I think The Entertainer, although you'd miss out a lot of Laurence Olivier's great performance, is one. I think Saturday Night and Sunday Morning is one. Cass is one, because the dialogue is not there to either tell us who these people are as characters, to tell us what the theme is. The dialogue is almost part of the music and the soundtrack. And if you removed all the dialogue from this, and this could be, through the editing techniques, he uses jump cuts. He uses when he's doing the flashbacks of the criticism of consumerism, you get the little star that comes up. You get the crossfades. You get the silent film speeded up footage where he's shooting at 16 and 18 frames per second to make it look like an old silent film. These are the types of things that are conveying that kind of information. And so, not only are you not supposed to hear what the man is playing on the guitar and singing, you're really not supposed to understand the dialogue either. That the dialogue is there as ambiance, because what he is actually giving you is not only his point of view, but his character's point of view. And the second, the last two are things that Richardson is really known for, which of course size is irrelevant, perfection is not an aim, and an attitude means a style, and a style means an attitude. That is to say, he's using these techniques as a slave to his story. Unlike, say, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just going to say, unlike, say, a Godard or a Truffaut, who is using the story as a way of showing off their cinematic techniques, Richardson doesn't really give a crap what this film looks like. He's not trying to create, and this goes back to what Sila was saying, he's not trying to create little perfect images that you could put into an art book that will sit on your living room table. He is attempting to tell a story visually, and so if that means using a documentary style, if it means using a handheld Bolex 16 millimeter and then blowing it up to 35 millimeter so that the footage looks a bit grainy, like he uses for the scenes where he's running around the pond, so be it. Because that's actually goes to what he's attempting to show. The thing is the sound enhancing the image. So it's the sound of, say, the snow crunching underneath his feet is as meaningful as the narration going on in his head on the soundtrack to that shot. Go ahead, Yassi.
I was just taking it in. I really like what you just said about this, because what I wanted to add was that, yeah, the, that these movies are being so personal. This is Anthony Gibbs, right? The editing. So what actually he does magic, I think, in this movie with the cross cutting, with the montage that you just mentioned, with the pacing. Yeah, I know that some people say that, oh, the movie is a bit too long, it could be cut. There's some moments that could, but I think that every bit that he puts here, with like the use of flashbacks, the that beautiful, I mean, that use of star, very old technique, but the star effect, but the way that it's used to, the to showcase that their lives become like a sitcom movie, series. The After the television comes in their life, their life becomes like the editing in their life, like changes like a TV series. So we see all the comeback of all these techniques in, like in WandaVision, in Disney series, in Marvel. So
Well, we talked about Richard Lester last week. 5 seconds and then I'll let you finish. But we talked about Richard Lester last week. And the influence I think this film had on A Hard Day's Night. And guess who Lester was using as his editor? for his next film, The Knack and How to Get It, the one that won the Grand Prix or sorry, the Palme d'Or at Cannes, Anthony Edward. Or
Anthony
sorry,
Gibbs, yeah.
Anthony Gibbs, Anthony Edwards. Wow, gosh, that he's a brat packer. Uh, but I'm getting my Anthony's confused. But Anthony Gibbs, I was recently watching a film of his called the film that he was an editor on called Reindeer Games, which was directed by John Frankenheimer. And I said to myself, "Oh my goodness, this was made by people who watched a lot of British cinema of the late 1950s and early 1960s because it's like set." And then I saw his name and I was like, "Oh, that's why." And you're right, it's the editing. I'm sorry that I'll stop interrupting and let you finish your point.
No, not at all. Of course, yeah, that's what I was getting. And also with the, this the cross cuttings that juxtapose this the Collins, the montage at the end, like with his runnings and the to depict the passage of time, and we never see those, the those credit cards that no. Title cards, what I'm talking about, the title cards that it's past, it's present, but because the use of editing,
Credit cards, that's a Freudian slip because we were talking so much about
so
consumerism.
much about money. Exactly. So, and the cross cuttings, the to go through past and present to emphasize on the passage of time, the Collins psychological state, the rapid cuts, and like we have to talk about that. And you were talking the use of slow motion, freeze frames, the superimposed, all that to show the dreamlike sequences, to differentiate the dreamlike sequences and his inner thoughts and his emotions and the past, the way that it, the edges are the blurred edges, the different ratios that is used, like this use of different ratios for past and present. We saw it this year in Long Legs, like 2024, the comebacks of all these old techniques that back then in these movies that were revolutionary. We see how compelling they're today. Not to forget, you were talking about the overlapping dialogues and sometimes the sound that the filmmaker doesn't want us to hear or not. Let's not forget that, what was his name, that like not that a very well known filmmaker like Robert Altman, that is
Christopher Nolan. And if people want a very bad conversation about Christopher Nolan's very bad use of these techniques, they can go back to our very bad episode on Oppenheimer. It's only 3 hours of your life that you'll never get back. That's my ad for today.
yeah, and just like that, because we mentioned like we didn't like Christopher Nolan, we lost our audiences, but that's okay. Like, but seriously, see how tasteful and brilliant and masterful they were used in this movie with the lowest budget. That's what I was getting into. Like, yes, we see it in Fight Club. This is the movie that creates movies like Fight Club. This is the movie, yeah,
Oh
I
no,
know,
no, no,
yeah,
David Fincher! I lost the game. I lost the game, but
yeah,
no,
you
no
lost.
Star Wars, right?
Yeah, so, but wait,
And by the way, Kathy is still here. We have the best audience on Clubhouse right now, as far as I'm concerned.
always,
We
Kathy,
love
we
you,
love you
Kathy.
so much. I really don't know what you find in us in this in these rants, but we love you because it's hope. Yeah, they're trying to say this movie is hopeless, but I still see hope only by having you here. So anyway, yeah, I saw. But seriously, see the budget for that Fincher gets for his movies. Yes, I love the guy, but compare it to this one with the same theme. In that's almost the same thing that he's trying to do in Fight Club.
But
And
isn't there also the opposite of what Richardson and Silitoe is doing here? Because in Fight Club, you literally have him blowing up all of the all of the credit records and turning to the camera to explain he is I'm blowing this up so that everyone's credit is going to be the same. He's making soap out of human body parts to symbolize consumerism, and says so. Hey, we are doing this I mean, in a way, isn't Fincher doing the opposite of this? Now, I realize Fincher is doing that as a satire of that in itself. But in a way, isn't kind of Fincher the anti-Silitoe and the anti-Richardson?
I
Because Fight Club
completely
is by
agree.
no means a subjective film. He is using, Lindsay Anderson could have directed that as far as the camera being a fourth wall. It's very, very, the camera becomes a very objective observer of that film.
Oh, absolutely. Because even in that rebellion theme, like the way that in the loneliness of the long distance runner, Smith's rebellion is expressed through this a personal choice to lose a race. A quiet act of defiance that challenges this institutional control over it. But in Fight Club, that rebellion is more overt. It's violence. It manifests in physical fights. But here, just like I was saying, that the simplicity, the realism in this movie, in these genres, in these movement, in this cinema movement, that is so compelling to me today, and I think they're still fresh. It's in the realism of them. The thing
In
that
a
they
way,
were
wouldn't
so
you
criticized
say
with.
Fight Club compares a lot more to this sporting life because of course you have the violence on the rugby field and what that symbolizes in this sporting life, and the objective way in which Anderson is portraying and showing his symbols. He shows his hand literally at the end. You have the Bergman-esque scene where he smashes a spider against the wall, and that's a lot more Fincher, where and he and Lindsay Anderson such a careful in the way that he blocks and he creates scenes. That's very much more Fincher. Whereas there's a looseness about Carol Rice and Tony Richardson, which not to say that they don't put as much detail into the film, but the detail that they're going for is to make the film feel as loose as possible, whereas Fincher and Anderson try to make their films feel as tight as possible.
But I still want to connect what you were talking about to what Sila was saying, that I keep want to go back and talk about, because I found that really interesting that he says our judgment toward Colin Smith, and now what you're saying is our judgment toward Frank Machine in the sporting life, and how, like, society, how the system of sort changed these two characters, the way that Colin Smith reclaimed his autonomy, but that oppression and suppression, and that the expectations of society, the all this turmoil, inner turmoil in Frank Machine, kind of turn him into this Bergmanian, disillusioned, kind of harsh character at the end. The conflicts within these two people at the end gave them two different realities. And that, I think,
A lot of
led.
go ahead, Sila.
No, I was just going to say that in the sporting life, if I remember correctly, Frank used his possibilities to play the game. He demanded the money he was going to get. He put certain things on the table, and he basically played the game. Colin refuses to play the game. He refuses to accept everything, everything that's going on around him. The film doesn't allow a lot of screenplay or monologues or storyline to dedicate to the development of a possible relationship to that girl. But other than that, he has zero connection to his mother. He has zero connection to his siblings, which they look like they could be his kids. So I don't know what that was all about. He has obviously no he has he so in that sense, I do understand. I'm not really against using the term of a rebel, because he's rejecting all these things. But I just don't like to focus on that word, because to me, the other film where
He's
you have
not
the
rebelling against society, right, Sila? He's rebelling against his own life.
No, to me, he's rejecting that. He's not rebelling. He's rejecting it. He's not playing the game. But in
That's
the other
a very
film, I
good
can
way.
remember.
You know what? That's a very good point, and that's a very good way to sharpen that point. I like that. Thank you, Sila.
I cannot remember the name of the film where we see the three young men instigating and playing, and they get punished.
That was our Lord and Savior Lindsay Anderson's If.
If correct. So in that film, that is what I personally call provocateurs. They're very intelligent. They're playing games against the other students. They're playing games against many systems. They're playing a lot of games. Colin plays no games whatsoever. He actually goes with his friend to steal from the bakery because they see the window open. They're not. I don't see in the film an instance where you see, oh, he's an evil guy or he's a petty thief. We don't see it. They talk about it, but I don't see it.
Well, and a lot of that, I think, is also in Tom Courtney's performance and the way Richardson directs Tom Courtney's performance. The little moments of rebellion, and there are some, such as when Michael Redgrave's governor is chastising him for getting into a fight, and says, if you want to get into a fight, you can get a fight with the PE director. And that little smile at the PD director, there's your moment of rebellion right there. That's him rebelling.
Also, the interview with Brown.
I didn't run fast enough, did I? Yeah.
No. When the guy, his name is Brown, he's asking he's doing this psychological test, and he says, "I'll say a word, and you say the first thing that comes to mind." Colin is reacting the whole time, like to say, "What is this? What are we doing here?" And then he decides to play the game.
And what is the point of recording it?
Yes. So I don't see. To me, a rebel is somebody who is aggressive, going against the grain. This guy is simply saying, all I see around me is bullshit, so I'm going to stay away from it.
Well, and there's a line in the short story that didn't make it into the film when the governor is talking to him, and the governor keeps saying, we do this and we do that, and he says, I looked around to see who else was in the room, to who this fucking we is, and they couldn't use the word back then. I know there's 1,000 other blokes. I'm not remembering the line exactly right, but I know there's 1,000 other blokes in this joint. But there's only you and me in the room. So which one of us is we?
Another thing that I wanted to mention, which was one of the first impressions I got from the film, it might have something to do with the acting abilities of the two characters, Redgrave and Colin, and that is that, especially when it is a film that is addressing society conflicts or dynamics, it I saw Redgrave, the governor, as a person who is not thinking race, is not even thinking countryman. He is just thinking, I am a different creature. It has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with much more than simply, I am in a position to counsel you as to what life is. And if you are wise in any way, you would have to follow what I'm telling you. And that was a very tense situation, because I find that is very similar to a lot of fathers in their households, where they are not necessarily bad, but they're not necessarily loving. They're just convinced that their role is to be generals and command what you, as a little child, as a little nothing, are supposed to follow without asking questions.
Well, and that's that Protestant work ethic that we see time and time again in these British films, isn't it? I think this is one of Redgrave's most underrated performances, because he really gets that character down. He's a cog in the system. He is just doing his job, but he doesn't have to like it so fucking much. And that's not something you get from the dialogue. He doesn't say anything. That's all in Redgrave's countenance. It's all in his line delivery. It's all in his face.
And at the same time, it's a very interesting role, because as opposed to If, I don't know the English or the British culture well enough, the structuralism they have, but in this particular film, we are actually dealing with a man who acts as a master, excuse me, as a master of special delinquents. And what is his main goal? He wants to compete against a public school, which is actually very different to what a public school would be in the United States, where children with a lot of money go. So he's actually trying to get Colin to compete and beat a school of people with money. So that tells me
and the Collins competition is, of all people, Edward Fox.
yeah,
you know,
and the governor then is actually the leader of a school that is lesser than the other school. So that's already implying the insignificance or the arrogance of the governor.
but also he wants to stick it to the man, just
Yes.
which is, as we pointed out, Courtney has no interest in sticking it to the man. He wants to opt out completely, and again, a lot of that is in the performance, I think, not in the dialogue and not in the plot. I think both Courtney and Redgrave, and of course Redgrave's daughter Vanessa Redgrave became Mrs. Tony Richardson a year after this, and until he and who I consider one of the most beautiful women in the world, who, until Tony Richardson left her for Jean Moreau, who I also consider one of the most beautiful women in the world, which is surprising that I love Tony Richardson's films so much, because I really should hate this motherfucker's guts, Leave some for the rest of us, guy.
Yeah, and their daughter Natasha, that later married Liam Neeson. Let's just say that. But now that
And Jolie Richardson, who died tragically in that ski accident.
And Jolie was very attractive.
Yeah, good genes. A lot of good genes went in there, and unfortunately, I will say this though. Unfortunately, Richardson did die during the HIV pandemic, and that was when he the first time when he actually came
I
forward with the fact that he'd been an active bisexual his entire life. But he and although they never officially married, he and Jean Moreau were still together until the day he died, which was in 1991. So they were together for, let's see, that would be 24 years. So he did actually find the right one in the end.
well, that's debatable. If he was homosexual, he apparently didn't find the right one.
Well, we're not going to get into gender fluidity, but he was bisexual, number one, and number two, the French and their ideas of cheating are not something to be discussed in a room called UK Cinema History. If we ever pop up a French cinema history house, we can have that debate.
We really need a French and Italian and German cinema. But
And
now
Mexican,
that
and
we're
a
getting away
Mexican.
from
We
this,
need Luis
and
Buñuel.
yeah, oh, of course. But something that I have to mention before I forget, last week, after we had the Hard Day's Night room, Sila treated us with a room that Eric, it was way past your bedtime, but I enjoyed a very like a music dance, like Beatles dance room for 2.5 hours, and it was amazing. And Sila, thank you so much for keeping the spirit of Beatles like keep going on even after the room, and it was so good. I had to mention it, and thank you. And a disclaimer, now that I'm talking about the last week, a disclaimer that you said that I forgot to talk about Star Wars, but I have to say Jason was here, and I said that Jason was the one who introduced me to Kogonada, and Kogonada directed 2 episodes of Star Wars Acolyte. So yeah, it now I mentioned Star Wars in this episode and made a disclaimer about the previous episode.
I love you, Yazzie, but go fuck yourself. Anyway, okay. Good job. Good job. Jeez. You know what? I'm going to find a bigger challenge for you.
So going back to you comparing, because I think Silitoe's book, short story actually, is a very good one, and he did a lot of contribution to this free cinema movement. I think we have to say that this non-linear storytelling actually, yes, it's so great on Anthony Gibbs editing, in Walter Lacey's amazing cinematography, was also in Taste of Honey, that collaboration with Tony Richardson. Uh, Amazing collaboration, everything, but that non-linear storytelling is in the book, and
Well, we
very
talked about that
beautifully done.
in the Saturday night Sunday morning room about how hard it is to adapt Silitoe because he doesn't believe in editing, self-editing. Once he writes a sentence, it's down, and he doesn't edit it again. And but what I think, and I obviously, if anybody listens to our Saturday night and Sunday morning room, obviously I liked this film a lot more than I liked Saturday night and Sunday morning. Um, and I think one of the reasons why is that lends itself a lot better to this short story format than it does to a full-length novel where you're going to have a whole chapter describing a vase and the flowers that are being held in it, and it's in there because the guy who wrote the sentence doesn't believe in editing, even though in retrospect it really doesn't belong in that novel.
And again, going back to what you and Sila were talking about when uh, comparing this to If, I figured that Tony Richardson, I mean, our Lord and Savior Lindsay Anderson, he like that defiance, that rebellious act in his characters and his movies are so, we see it more in his movies than Tony Richardson. Tony Richardson is a little bit like, you know, kind with his characters. They don't have that kind of, that chaotic ending, that
Well,
rebellious
isn't that the
of the
difference between
story.
subjectivity and objectivity,
Oh, absolutely,
Yazzie? That
absolutely.
because he's a subjective lens, you really can't have that kind of criticism of your characters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that theme of, as I just said, that especially in If, that the way that these, and also what Sila said about uh Frank in The Sporting Life, beautifully put it, like the way that their anger within kind of reflects in their act of rebellion against the system. It's like he and here, like here, Sila said something very nice. He says the way that they played the game, and I think that's a very good comparison between these two characters, how they approached the game, and the way that, the
That's a great point to start wrapping this room up on, and I'm going to throw this out as as kind of a final topic before we start moving towards finishing the room up. Do you know who I was reminded of when both reading this story and seeing this film was Herman Melville's Billy Budd, who completely opts out of the system. I'd rather not, sir. Which is now, of course, that's as American as apple pie. So he's not, again, because we don't have an aristocracy, he's not rebelling against the aristocracy. Well, because the aristocracy means absolutely nothing to the working class, neither is Silitoe, because what does the aristocracy mean, good or for good or for evil in a consumerist society that you can't afford because you didn't pass your 11 plus exam, you know. But and I kind of want to throw this out as the finishing subject. Now we've stated that we don't, Sila and I don't believe that Colin is rebelling, but that we do think that Richardson and Silitoe are rebelling against the English system. And we've talked about a few of the issues, like we talked about consumerism, and we talked about the 11 plus education system, and basically the trap and the grind. But if you were to try, if someone were just kind of ask, hey, what is the theme of the loneliness of the long distance runner, and had to kind of put it into uh, an eighth grade paper, what would the headline of that paper be? What is it that they are rebelling against? And obviously it can be several things, but primarily, what did you two take from Richardson and Silitoe's combination here? What are we, the audience, supposed to do with it?
I
Well, my
think
first.
there is the difference. Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
go
Let
ahead.
me
Go
say
ahead.
this, and I give it to you. I just wanted to say there is a catharsis, in a cathartic feeling in his loss. His decision to lose the race, kind of assert this individuality and autonomy that I keep talking about, is rejecting the manipulation and the control imposed on him. I think that is the main theme of the loneliness of the long distance runner, because there is a zen sense in there is a that in long distance running, but it's like he is rebelling against that, but not conforming to the expectations of winning, because He was trying to be the fastest. He lost all the time. As I said at the beginning of the room, he thought that his loss in his life was because he wasn't running fast enough. But even what happens at the end is we as the audience expect him to win, but he reclaims this agency. He reclaims this sense of personal power by not winning. And I think the this by creating this satisfaction, he asserts his autonomy, and you know he he gives us that cathartic feeling.
So I'm curious as to, well, you both know it, because I've heard that you read the book. I have not read the book. I'm wondering if the book uses the title more, do you see more of the title in the book? Because in the
Yes, once more. So instead of once, it's twice because you also get it at the end. But he's basically, it's because it's a circle, because it's his flashback from the beginning to the end.
no
So the
no
entire
no
thing. So he says the title twice. He says that and that's The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, but he's basically just repeating himself from the beginning.
no, that's not what I mean. I I have, until now I don't have it anymore, but until now I had a difficult time trying to place the title to the film. The 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 title, first of all, the title is talking about a long distance runner, and Colin is not a long distance runner. He comes across this girl by chance, excuse me, and he comes across running by chance. He's not a long distance runner. So I was wondering if the book gives more flesh to the idea of the title, because in the film I find that the title doesn't really touch on the film, or vice versa.
But he is on a long distance run,
Yes, but
and
playing the
there's
piano.
reflections during that run.
Okay, but playing the piano does not make you a pianist.
No, he I don't think the title is saying the loneliness of a person who is a long distance runner by occupation. It's the loneliness of the person who is on a long run, if that makes any sense.
I will accept it. It makes no sense to me, but I will accept it. But I did come to the conclusion a few seconds ago, that I, I'm sharing what I see. I see a possible comparison of the way he runs through life, which is not really a very planned. Like I said, the girlfriend just happens to be on the sidewalk when they steal the car, and that happens with many things. So the idea that his life is a lonely one and not the run, but his life, he's contemplating all these things, and when he's running, especially when he's running the last race, he is thinking, reflecting, remembering, feeling. We see a lot of emotions, not just what happened, but a lot of emotions displayed during his run through his memories. So that's what I found now when I've been trying to figure out how does the film address the loneliness of a person who is not a long distance runner. He just happened to run into that situation, and I think it's 5 kilometers that he's supposed to be running that last fight, last race. And I just wanted to have for myself an explanation as to why,
Well, the loneliness of the long distance runner sounds a lot better than the isolation of the short distance plotter who fell into long distance running.
Yeah, but you're going to another extreme. I'm pointing to something and you're taking
So
it.
For
poetic.
humor, not seriously, Sila. Sorry.
I know, but okay. I just wonder
That's my
maybe
way of saying your point
silly,
is very valid. That is my way of saying
maybe
yes, you
maybe
have a very good point.
maybe Silitoe would have an explanation, and as a result, or around the corner, one of you do know from reading the book that there is actually something elementary missing in the film that is very clear in the book. That's basically what I was trying to see if that's something like that.
There's a lot of description of A, loneliness, and B, the landscape that he's running through in the short story that's
That's
done
important. Yeah,
visually in the film.
that's important. I
And I
mean,
think the term loneliness captures the emotional and psychological state of Colin Smith. You know, his long distance running serves as a metaphor for the inner isolation and alienation from the society and the institutional system. And long distance running, it's a sports itself, as a sport itself is a solitary and demanding, requiring a significant amount of individual endurance. It's not a teamwork. It's a lonely sport. You know, I think that aligns with the character.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and I'm just thinking there's also a very interesting, perhaps, ambivalence because his, first of all, I think it's a very important part of the film when when the governor asks him, did you catch up because you wanted to at the end, or was that your plan from the beginning? So he's questioning Colin as to how his mind works, how his spirit works when he's doing something like that. And the point that I actually wanted to make is that in terms of loneliness and the whole process that goes through him when he's running on his own, he actually gets that because the governor sees something in him, or he wants something from him, and as a result he says to him, you are allowed to run every morning on your own outside of the fences. So actually, as a punishment, he is given the allowance, first of all, to be free and to be lonely.
Oh, that actually, I think we have to mention that it's so interesting that we are doing this episode during the Olympics. So
Yes,
what you
yes.
just said kind of questions the point of this exploitation of of these athletes. I think that brings up a whole lot of the
Well, that's what you
conversation.
get. That's what you get for playing the game. You play the governor's game, and that's what you get.
Precisely. Oh, well said. Especially because it's the climax of the narrative. That moment of choice is
Yeah,
the whole climax.
yeah, but I find this kind of contradiction very interesting that the I know that the governor is not punishing him by allowing him to be outside, but being able to run outside does not speak freedom for him, for the runner, but it allows him to dive into his world in a very different way, which is not easy. It's probably necessary and it's good for him, but not an easy way of life.
Yeah, self-reflection is the worst
Correct.
punishment.
Correct.
That's why solitary confinement is the worst thing you can do to a prisoner, right?
Which is what compels him to not finish the race.
That's a great place to end it on, I think.
Yeah,
Yassi,
triumph and defeat.
that's
Triumph and defeat.
I had a quote, but but there's no way I'm going to be able to beat that. Sila, that's excellent. I think we should quit while we're ahead. We did go a little bit longer than the movie, but so I'm just going to go with final thoughts on the loneliness of the long distance runner. We're going to start with Yassi and then move to Sila. I mean, Yassi
Well, I
Soufi.
think that was a great conversation. That was a great conversation. I really didn't expect to get this much different perspectives from this film. I was expecting, I saw this the personal freedom and authenticity and the search for meaning in existentialism in this film, the individualism in this film, rebellion against authority. You guys open up a whole new vision for me to see this movie through this social criticism, the class struggle, the institutional oppression, and you saw it totally differently. And I really loved what I got out of this conversation today more than any other. Honestly, I have to say it, any other conversations that we had, because it was never this much. Like you just, Sila just said that the contradiction in the film thematically. And what happened to me is pretty much the same thing. Like that, I always saw that moral integrity in the film. That what how Colin questions himself, his psychological resilience, all like versus his coming of age, his youth, his rebellious youth. But you guys, I said, you made me see this movie as a very nihilistic, Camus, that defiance against the absurd kind of movie. And I really enjoyed everything. And also from the uh, uh, cinematic and technical aspect, what we talked about, the editing, the cinematography, that classical use of slow motion, and everything, and also the performances. We said that how performances can, the close-ups, the simple performing of a dialogue, how can actors can, especially in these type of indie low budget movies, and their close relationship with the filmmakers, and when the filmmaker gives the actors that that freedom to put their input on the character, this is what happens. Like just like the Michael Redgrave's character, like the governor, how he created a whole character only by his acting and his performance. And I really enjoyed everything we talked about. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Sila. I really love this movie. I say it. I have to say it again. Yes.
Well, thank you for choosing it, Yassi. Sila, your final thoughts on loneliness of a long distance runner?
Well, I wanted to mention one thing we have mentioned it, but not really talked about. And I just want to underline that aspect of the film, and that is particularly the performance of Colin and the governor. Exceptional performances. The minuscule expressions of both in different circumstances when he's been in this test, psychological test. A lot of facial expressions that are very subtle and but very poignant as to what they're thinking and feeling and not just what they're saying. And I also want to underline, similar to many other movies that we have seen, but especially similar to Kess, the tragical dissection or the dissection of the tragical structure that we see in certain homes. I think this they didn't go very deep, but they had a very good sketch of how empty, how loveless, at least from my point of view, this family was, even though, you know, they had no reason to be loveless. But there's this essence of no, the way the child speaks to the other, cursing him or her, and there are so many things going on in this home. Forget the intruder that came after the death of the father, but just them on their own, and even the last temperament of the last moments of the father. I, in so many films, like in Kess, we have seen this really, from my experience, depressing homes, families, just trying to survive. And in Kess, you see in many situations that she is giving her love the best she can. But I find, I wouldn't say depressing, but I wanted to point out how tragical this film is, as well as enlightening and analytical. But the performance of many of them, especially the two main characters, I found very, very good.
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I
go
know you
ahead.
want to wrap it up, but I just had to say that this, because Sila also mentioned that running, and why, like, the governor won't punish didn't punish him for running, and this counterproductive aspect of running. Also, the use of jazz music, and how jazz is that improvisation nature of jazz, that goes align with the theme of nonconformity, and associated with the rebellious act, and how Colin Smith, at the very ending, he improvised this act of, he chooses not winning, and all the time, like, he playing jazz music, the way that it sets that mood. Even the music helped kind of foreshadow the ending for us. The rhythms, that unpredictable rhythms of jazz, that sets the mood for this ending. Even though, yes, it shows the inner turmoil, the dynamic nature of his journey, that vibrant sense, especially at the beginning. I asked Sila in the back channels that, like, that percussion upbeat in the begin and the beautiful opening scene of the movie. But now, after all these conversations that we had, I think add that also the choice of music, it gives this, helps the narrative and foreshadows the ending, the unpredictable ending that we expect from the movie.
Well, and Dizzy Gillespie once said the difference between jazz and noise is jazz is when you know your instrument and know the rules so well that you can break it, and noise is when you break the rules anyway. So, on that note, next week we are going to be going back to 1959. We had been discussing the Goons the last couple of weeks, so I decided to work in Peter Sellers from the Goons and the Bolting Brothers 1959 film, I'm All Right, Jack. Now, technically, this is a sequel to 1956's Private's Progress, but there is absolutely no need to watch Private's Progress to either understand All Right, I'm All Right, Jack, or
to participate in our conversation because they are actually two complete and totally separate films. They just happen to involve the same characters, but the cast in this is phenomenal. You've got Dennis Price, who, of course, we all loved so much in Kind Hearts and Coronets. You've got Sir not yet Sir Richard Attenborough. You've got the lovely Margaret Rutherford, who whose virtues we extolled in Chimes at Midnight and talked about her roles in so many films, and Miss Marple. The list goes on and on and on. Malcolm Muggeridge even shows up in the film. It's a delightful little film, but it's also got a very interesting, by today's standard, kind of reactionary theme that we get to. So there's going to be a lot to talk about next week. And then because this is the beginning of the month, I just kind of want to sum up the schedule. The next week, we have set aside for a kind of a non-British film called The Death of Stalin from 2017. That's a chance for Matt to go over one of his favorite films. It does, however, have Monty Python's Michael Palin in it, and was technically co-produced by a British studio. So as far as we're concerned, it's as British as beans on toast. No, we just kind of snuck that one in there. Then that's going to be followed on August 22nd, we're going to have a very special edition where we talk about a new series on Amazon, an adaptation of Boccaccio's The Decameron, with music from Duran Duran and New Order. And then we're going to end the month with Yassi's choice of a film called The Gentleman from 2019, starring Matthew McConaughey and directed by some guy named Guy Ritchie that Yassi tells me is pretty good at this whole directing movies thing. So we shall see. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, and it's our very first time we get to discuss Guy Ritchie, and I'm very, very excited about adding him to the list of directors that we get to talk about. So that's going to be our schedule going forward. Unless anybody else has anything else, I'm going to be closing this room. Anybody? I'm going to then close the room in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good night, everybody, and have a great one.